This is going to be what I'm going to call a gentle introduction to R and RStudio to get started with a project and bring in some data and do just a teeny bit of looking at that data and introduce you to some of the Tidyverse concepts. So you should have downloaded a zip file that has a data file called ma.txt and a text file called startercode.txt that has just a little code that we're going to copy and paste today. To get started, make sure those are in a directory where you know where to find them and that they're unzipped and in the same directory, obviously. Then go ahead and open RStudio. So it should, there's probably nothing open. And what we're going to do is create a project and point that project at that folder where you saved those files. So I recommend that you create a project for any analysis that you're going to do. I would have separate projects for each thing. So as a journalist, of course, usually I have separate projects for a particular story or for a particular topic, say education data or census data or something like that. But usually I do it based on the story. So, you know, for someone not in journalism, it might be a particular project that you have to work on as part of your job or something like that. So we're going to go to the File menu in RStudio and say a new project. And it's going to bring up three options. It's going to ask you to, if you want to create a directory somewhere and put that project in that, or if you want to point it at an existing directory, which is what we're going to choose here. There's also a way to set up version control using something like GitHub right from the beginning, and that's what you would do here. I'm not going to get into that today, but that's the option. So we're going to choose existing directory, and then you browse and find that folder where you have it saved. So it's going to show you nothing. It's going to say there's nothing in that folder. Just make sure you have it pointed at the right folder and say open, and then say create project. And RStudio should turn here a little bit, and then it's going to change. And down in the lower right, you should see that it created a rproj file that has the same name as the folder that you put it in. And then there's the two text files that we had in that directory. So it should all look like that. If it doesn't, here's a time to pause and maybe go back and make sure you were pointing at the right directory. Okay, so you notice we don't have any script files here. We don't have any of those script files like we looked at in the last video. So we're going to create one now. So go to File, New File, and let's choose our notebook. I'm going to do most of these lessons in our notebook because I like this. It's relatively simple, but it also allows you to display your results and your charts and things right in line with your code. So when you open a new notebook file, it's going to have all this stuff in here that is directions, that is access that you don't need. The top part, lines 1 through 4, you do need to keep. That's the header, and you can change this. So I'm going to change mine to Gentle Introduction to R. You can call it whatever you want, you know, my first R script or something. And then starting on line 6 where it says this is an R markdown within the notebook, we're going to delete everything after that. Okay, so we need some code chunks. So you need to insert a new code chunk. So go to the insert menu at the top and insert R. You can see that RStudio accommodates some other coding options as well, but we're always going to use R here. So so if you haven't already, you should have already installed all your libraries. Today we're going to use two libraries, Tidyverse and Janitor. So the first thing we need to do is load our libraries. If I can spell today, there we go. So to load a library, you type the function library, and then you put the name of the library inside the parentheses. And so we're going to load two of them, Tidyverse and Janitor. If you type them both in here, now we can run this code chunk. So there's a bunch of ways to run a code chunk. One is this little button over here on the right where it says Run Current Chunk. Another is this Run button at the top where it gives you lots of options. Run the current chunk, run any lines that you have highlighted. And then there's things like run all chunks above or run all chunks below, which is useful when you get a big script going. So the other thing is keyboard shortcuts. If your cursor is in the code chunk, you can, well, on a single line of code, you can hit Control Enter and it'll run that one line of code. You'll see mine is taking a little while to run, and it's going to tell us that it loaded them. You'll also see that it's showing some conflicts here. Yours might not show this because you might not have these other packages installed. Like this is saying there's a conflict with a package called stats, which I have and you may not have. Okay, so I only loaded library because I did Control Enter on that one line. I can do Control Shift Enter, or on a Mac would be Command Shift Enter to run both of them. Or like I said, you could say run current chunk and it'll run the whole thing. Now it may not show you anything here, but if you're nervous, like, oh my gosh, did it work or not? What you can do is go to the Packages tab over on the lower left, and you can search for one of your packages. So like Janitor, you'll see that it has a checkbox. When you search for Tidyverse, yeah, there you go. It will show you that. It's also probably going to show that read R, which is one of the packages in Tidyverse, is also turned on. There's several of them. Read R is one of the ones we're going to use. Okay, so that's loading the libraries. Let's save here quick. So you can do File Save, or you can push the little Save button, and let's save this. I'm going to call it Intro to R Script with underscores in the name, and hit Save. And now if we look in the File section, you'll see it's going to have the file as a .rmd, and then it also automatically, whenever you save, it automatically makes an HTML page. We have nothing much to see here on the HTML page yet, but we'll get there. Okay, so sometimes I load my libraries in its own code chunk just for simplicity, and sometimes I add more code in that same chunk, but let's just keep chunking it out here. So we'll do Insert R, and this time we're going to load some data. So that starter code file I gave you has some code in it where it says import our data. You can go ahead and copy that and paste it into that code chunk. So I've got double annotations there. So this is probably a little scary looking. This particular data file is baby names data for the state of Massachusetts that the Social Security Administration releases. It's a nice and simple data set, so I like using it for this introduction, but it's difficult to import because of two things. One is that it doesn't have column names in the top row. There's nothing there. So we are going to tell it that there's no column names, and we're also going to give those columns names on the way in. And then it also doesn't handle one of the columns correctly, the gender column. The gender is listed as either F or M, and the girls are at the top of the file, and so R tends to think that it's a true false column and that the F means false, and so it gets tripped up when it hits the M records. So we need to tell it very explicitly that that column is a character, and that's what the C is. So I won't get too far into it, but those are some there's some ways that you can deal with problems when you bring your data in if it's not coming in easily. But most of the time, what you're going to do is the simple beginning part of this, and let me break this down a little bit. what we're doing here is saying, let's create a data frame called baby names. And that's me calling it that. And these two characters together are what's called an assignment operator. So an assignment operator is used to assign data to a data frame. And you're going to want to do the keyboard shortcuts here. So I'm going to rebuild this a little bit. So I'm making a data frame called baby names. And then the assignment operator, on Windows, it's Alt and then the plus the minus key. On a Mac, it would be Option plus the minus key. And it'll create that symbol for you. So then we need to tell it what to assign to that data frame. And in this case, we're going to use a function from the readr package of Tidyverse and the function is called read_CSV. So read_CSV. And then you tell it what the name of the file is. And it needs to be exactly as it appears. Notice that the data file is located in our working directory, which is what we see over here. As long as that file is sitting in there, you don't need to do anything additional on here. In some of the subsequent lessons, I'm going to show you how to point it to a subdirectory in case you want to store your data like in a subdirectory somewhere else. So this is typically the most basic code you need to bring in some kind of comma delimited text file. And notice this file is a .txt, but when you open it up, you'll see that the columns are delimited by commas. So it is read CSV. There are functions and packages for bringing in all different kinds of data files. So there's a read TSV for tab delimited. There is read Excel for bringing in an Excel file. And you could tell it to go to a particular sheet in an Excel file and even a particular range of cells within there. There's ways to bring in SPSS files, data files. You can link to a MySQL server or a SQL server, or like the possibilities are endless, and really it's just a matter of finding the right package and function to bring in what you need. So that's my spiel on importing. We'll cover more of that in another session. But for now, what we're going to do is run this chunk of code. And what it's going to do is put something in our environment for the first time. So now we have a data frame. In Tidyverse world, they call it a tibble. I like calling it a data frame. And it's telling us here that we have 118,062 observations, which means rows. And then we have 5 variables, which means columns. And you can either click on this to open it up, and just like you would look at in Excel, or in your code chunk here, you can just simply type baby names, and I'm going to do a Control Enter, and it'll show it down here. Or you can do View Baby Names and hit Control Enter on that line, and it's going to pop it up just like we did the first try. So there's lots of different ways to like open your table and take a look at it, your data frame, and see what you have. So here's what we have. So we know the state is from Massachusetts, and the state column is going to be MA for all of them. Here's that gender. I mentioned that as M and F for gender. The year, and then the name and the number of births in that year. So this is saying there were 989 babies named Mary who were born in 1910. The caveat being that these are all people who got a Social Security card. So this data is less reliable in these early years because Social Security cards haven't always been around. But it is quite reliable in modern years, and this is the data source that is used every time you see that what are the most popular baby names this year story. This is where they get that from. So there's our data, and we can look at it. So the Tidyverse package has a series of has a package called dplyr, and dplyr is the tools for doing some analysis. And it has a series, what it calls verbs. But if you know anything about SQL, this will look very familiar to you. select, filter, arrange, summarize, or you could type summarize, the British version of summarize. These are the majority of them. There's also one called mutate, which we probably won't get into in this session, but these are all the verbs that you would use to look at your data. So let's just do a couple simple ones, and then we're gonna probably move on. So when you want to run a little, so let's imagine we're doing a little filtering in our data. We'll start with that. It's like, just imagine you're in an Excel spreadsheet and you want to filter your data, or you want to only look at a few, let's start with, you only want to look at a few columns. So in R, you have to be explicit and tell it which data frame do I want to use. Even though we only have one data frame, you still have to tell it which one. And then you use this pipe operator that I noted above here. So the pipe operator is used to connect actions. And the keyboard shortcut in Windows is Control-Shift-M, and it's Command-Shift-M on a Mac. So we've already done one operation as we told it a data frame to use. And now we'll put in a pipe. And then we can tell it, I want to see only let's say 3 columns, the gender, the year, and the number of births. So I can say select gender, year, we need name, don't we, and births. And notice I put them in the order that they appear in the table, but you can put them in whatever order you want. So now if we run this code chunk, it's going to give us an answer down here below. Notice that there's 118,062 rows. Interestingly enough, that's the size of our table. So it's giving us all the rows out of our data set, but it's only giving us these 4 columns. And you can paginate through the various rows down here below. So now let's say, so that's a way of filtering by the columns, is using this select, like these are the columns I'm going to display, right? So let's do something more like filtering in Excel. Let me see if I can get this to move up. There we go. So we can do a similar thing, and we can say, I want to see year, name. Actually, let's do year, name, and births this time. And then I'm going to do another pipe. And then we can say filter. Oh, wait a minute. We have to do this first. Well, I'll show you an error message here. This is a good practice. Filter gender equal F. Okay, so the filter is where we say we only want to see the rows where the gender is a girl. In this case, girl is represented in the data using a capital letter F, and R is case sensitive. It needs to be exactly as it appears in the data. And notice that I said 2 equal signs. That's what you need when you're referencing a value from in your data. You're saying a particular column equals this particular value. So I'm going to run this, and it's going to throw an error message on me. It's saying object gender not found. And let me give you this one piece of advice first. R's error messages are horrible. I think there's one that I actually like that is helpful. This one is a little helpful. A gender is not found. Well, so this helps. The reason for this is that we are doing these piping operations. And so what has happened is we started with this whole data frame, and then we winnowed it down to only these 3 columns. And so by the time it got to filter, it didn't know where gender was because it wasn't there. So this order of this needs to be back here. The filter needs to be the first thing you do, and then you can select. So now if we run this, we're going to get our answer. And you'll see now we're down to 67,930 rows, not as many. And let me show you the error message that I like that actually helps you. So the first part is really confusing, but then it says this usually means that you've used equal instead of equal. Did you mean gender equal F? Like, there you go. It's giving you the answer. I need 2 equal signs there. So pay attention to that one. That's an easy one to trip up on when you are first getting started. There we go. we'll do one more thing and we're going to call it quits. Now, if we add on one more piece, arrange, we can tell it, we'll arrange by births, but we'll do it descending, which you have to put DESC in front of it. And let's add one more thing to the filter. We'll do year equal 2018. Notice that the year column is listed right here as a double. That means it's numeric. And because it's numeric, we don't need to put any quotes around that year in our filter. So what we're going to do here is say, give me the girls who were born in 2018 and show me the name and the number of births and put the biggest one on top. So this will be the most common girl name in 2018. There it is, Emma, narrowly edging out Olivia, at least in Massachusetts. So there's a very brief introduction to some Tidyverse concepts. The next video will get you really going on truly, analyzing your data with these basic concepts in mind. I'll show you one more thing. We're going to hit save, and then you'll notice that you now have an HTML over here. I'm going to say open and view in web browser, and now we can see here's our code, here's that text that I dropped in the white area, here's the results of our first query, and then here's some more text I put in there, and there's another query and the results, another query and the results, all on a nice, beautiful page.